morning, everyone. My name's Hillary, and I'm the lead strategist at NucoBrain, and I will be moderating the event this morning. I just wanted to say welcome to our event about re-engaging your internal audience. We've got a panel of change management and internal comms experts, and I think it's going to be a really, really great discussion. So welcome, and we're really happy that you're with us this morning. I'm going to start by telling you a little bit about NucoBrain, and then we'll have the panelists introduce themselves. We've got 45 minutes for discussion, and then we've got 10 minutes for questions at the end. But if you do have questions throughout the panel, please do submit them in the Q&A box, and we will make sure they get answered either during the panel or during the discussion at the end. So a little bit about NucoBrain. So we are a content creation studio, and we're focused on simplifying complex topics, which can span from internal comms, branded content, or learning and development. And we do this for a wide variety of clients. You can see some of them listed here, but anything from De Beers Group to EDF to JP Morgan to even John Lewis. So we've got a lot of experience in simplifying the complex, which we all know this year has been. And so we wanted to bring everyone together to kind of talk about what that has meant for internal comms managers and change communications managers. So I just wanted to call out, if you are going to tweet or share anything across LinkedIn or any other channels, you can find us at NucoBrain. And if you want to use some of our hashtags, Get Back on Track or NucoBrain events, then we can find you and engage with you, meet you online, and start sharing your content as well. All right, so today is about post-pandemic planning and re-engaging your internal audience. So as I mentioned, I'm joined by a panel of experts, and we're going to have them introduce themselves now. You can see a little bit about them here, but we're going to have them introduce themselves. I'm going to stop sharing, and then we can dive right into the discussion. So Tabitha, do you want to go first?
Hi, yes. Thanks so much for having me. I'm really delighted to be on this panel. I'm here to learn, actually, as well as to chat about our experience at OneWeb. So looking forward to this very much. So let me start by telling you a little bit about OneWeb. You can see behind me, OneWeb is on a mission to create a global telecom network from space. So this is creating broadband to the world from space. Why do we need that, I hear you say? There are still very many parts in the world that cannot get internet access at all, cannot be connected to the world's information. More than that, there are even more places in the world that haven't got a good enough connectivity signal to use all the modern apps, video, big data, connectivity to the cloud that we all need to use this service. So that's what OneWeb's about, and we're doing that by putting a constellation of satellites into low Earth orbit. They're about the size of a washing machine, and they go up in a rocket like the one next to me, and we're planning for our next launch in December. We've got 72 or 74 satellites in space right now. So it's really exciting at OneWeb, but we've had a bit of a roller coaster over the last few months, like everyone. So I'm here to talk about our experience and to listen to everyone else's. I just want to say, for me, my big 3 anchors for internal communications are that our employees hear it first. Ideally, they hear it from their line manager, somebody they trust, and that as an internal comms function, we're the kind of facilitators and creators of internal comms rather than the people who should be all responsible for it. I think everyone should be responsible for internal comms. So that's me. Hello.
I'm muted. Paulina, would you like to go next?
Yes, sure. So my background is in business psychology. So I specialize in helping organizations understand behavioral elements that impact the way they handle change. So mostly I focus on change management within the context of transformation programs such as ERP implementations, which are quite a big overhaul to any organization of any size. Mostly I work with big organizations with global brands. I've got experience in different industries, starting from FMCG through manufacturing, finance, aerospace, pharmaceuticals. So it's quite varied. I also worked across different countries, and my role is mostly focused on managing change adoption and change resistance, but also leveraging a lot of the communications tactics in the toolkit. So if I think about change management, that would be not just managing the change itself, but also looking at how do we communicate about change, and I think, and also training. And that is where those two disciplines, if you like, overlap quite nicely. And perhaps I could talk about what these touch points are and how to leverage methodologies from one area to the other and be more successful today.
All right, welcome.
Thank you.
Megan, would you like to go next?
Sure. Hi, good morning. I'm Megan Dold. I'm the head of communications for the EMEA region at the Financial Times, which is a global news and media organization. So I mostly do internal and corporate communications. This year it's been more internal. As I like to say, at a media company, nothing ever stays internal for long, so it's really one and the same thing these days. I've been doing comms and media and nonprofit space for almost 13 years. And I think we had probably a similar year to many people. You know, we went from sort of the immediate crisis phase in March to, you know, how are we going to get a newspaper out, which has never happened to us before, and also keep our journalists safe, to actually we can do this, business continuity, we're able to pivot to digital, and actually we can work from home pretty successfully. So are we in this for the long term? And I think I'm definitely keen to talk today about how do we keep morale and motivation and resilience high, because I think most employees are realizing that we're in this for the long run, and you know, we really have to sustain momentum and figure out how we're going to work successfully, no matter if we're in the office or outside. That's it for me.
Perfect. And then Prarthna.
Hi, so I'm Prarthna. I'm head of internal communications at ISG. It's a global construction services company. I've been working in the wider comm space and IC for the past 10 years in a range of industries: oil and gas, retail, property, and latest being construction. Over the past few months, it has obviously been a big focus on internal, and I think for the first time, not just trying to make sure that our communications is landing externally, but also landing internally. And for me, the big thing that I want to take into 2021 that I want to talk about today is actually some of the learnings we have from the pandemic and what comms channels, ways of communicating, leadership communications, manager communications that we can bring into the next year and the years beyond.
Perfect. Well, welcome. Well, we are talking about post-pandemic planning, and I know that everyone's kind of tired of hearing about COVID, but we need to start there. And I'd like to understand from each of you how the pandemic kind of affected your role. We will talk about everything that you've learned and as Prarthna said, what we're bringing forward. But I would like, just so that we're all starting at the same page, how did the pandemic change your role, and what did your reaction have to look like in your role? Anyone can start.
Do you want me to start?
Sure.
For me and the company OneWeb where I work, it was pretty unprecedented, actually. I think it's affected everyone tremendously. The unprecedented nature of the pandemic kind of really hit us hard in March for everyone, but for OneWeb in particular, it meant something even more serious. We suffered a blow as our funding was pulled, and as a kind of startup, this is our stream of funding being pulled is pretty much the biggest crisis that we could face. And so we had to go into Chapter 11 bankruptcy, and that was at the same time as the pandemic. So we were juggling with the pandemic and learning to work in that way, and in really most difficultly having to say goodbye to a great many teammates. So it's been a real roller coaster since, and you know, pretty, I guess, tough times for everybody. So it's affected all our roles. For me personally, going from a larger team to a much smaller team means we're doing everything. I don't mind. I'm happy to do that, but it's a challenge to kind of just rebase everyone's expectations, I guess. And yeah, just managing the communication, and that point about resilience that you made, Megan, is really critical for the teams both staying and the ones. I'm happy to say that we're coming back out of bankruptcy, so I'm here today, and bringing back many of our team members. So the roller coaster is getting smoother, but it's I guess the good outcome is that we're bringing back teammates, and that is building morale in of itself. So yeah, we've had a pretty torrid time of it, I have to say.
I can jump in. So for us, it was being a construction company. It was a really big challenge of obviously having a lot of people still on site. And if you're in the UK, I don't know if you remember Piers Morgan and his Shut the Sites campaign that was launching on GMB. Never really had to think that construction was going to make GMB and Piers Morgan, but it was definitely a challenge. We have a disparate workforce of people working on site. We also are a global business. So the big challenge of this was hitting Asia at first, and then we have offices in Singapore and Malaysia, Middle East. Then it started to hit Europe, and so our teams in Germany and our teams in Spain, and then in the UK. So it was making sure that actually we were not just only responding when it was starting to affect where the internal comms team or where the stat board is sitting, which is in London, but being really aware of actually the fact that all of our employees across the globe are experiencing different waves. And I think we can all, we're obviously going through possibly, hopefully approaching a second peak now, but it's again, trying to manage communication to various audiences and then still having employees go to site every day. And that was a really big challenge of how do you make sure that your sites are COVID secure? This is something we've never had to do before. So communication was so vital in everything that we were doing, because you had so many layers of a business that were affected in different ways. And we had to shut our sites for a period of time to make sure they were COVID secure. Then in the UK, we had the change from 2 meters to 1 meter. So it was just a constantly moving piece. But internally, what we did was really mobilized our leadership team. We mobilized a cross-functional team from various departments, our supply chain team, comms team, finance, HR. We met daily, and it was about making sure that we looked at the whole COVID response, and then individually across regions, and then actually making sure that line managers had the right messages for their teams, and they could do so on a more personal one-to-one level.
Meeting daily sounds like it's going to be an important factor, and we have a question on that coming up as well, so we'll come back to that. But Megan, do you want to talk a little bit about how your role has changed?
Yeah, I mean, I would echo what Tabitha and Prarthna have said. All of those things are so important. I think it's been kind of a blessing and a curse, and I mean, definitely a curse in the sense that like our work has amplified, and like Tabitha said, we've had to make do with fewer resources. So, you know, I'm doing like all the sort of internal comms. We had to second people to different teams just to make sure that we had the right resources in the right place to save jobs, you know, and it was sort of a massive reshuffle in the business to prioritize, to protect jobs, you know, but also, you know, ensure that we could continue operating as a business. But I would say a blessing, because I think this has made internal comms, you know, more so than ever, I think people realize the value of internal comms. It's always been kind of like the little brother to corporate PR. And I think now it's people realizing, especially CEOs and leadership teams realize that, oh my God, internal comms is the most important thing right now. And if you aren't communicating, you know, I would say more frequently than before. And if the leadership team isn't visible, then you're not going to succeed as a business. It's all about visibility, transparency, and as Tabitha said, making sure your employees hear first and not from someone else. And so I say blessing in sort of like an ironic sense, but it has, I think, made our industry, the comms industry, ever more crucial and important than I would say ever before, at least in my career that I can remember.
Absolutely. And Paulina, I know you're coming at it from a bit of a kind of a change management angle, so it's a little bit different, but I'm sure, do you want to tell us a little bit about how your role has changed?
Yes, I think if I was to look at the type of projects I would normally be engaged to deliver, they have certainly changed. So there was when the news were known that we are going into lockdown and there was a lot of uncertainty, what I observed first was that there was the freeze in transformation and project management space and program space. So projects that were normally going ahead and were on plan to deliver certain changes, sometimes very crucial changes, had to be put on hold. And teams were asked to refocus. Sometimes they were just asked to step away and wait because we're just thinking about what to do next and what to focus on. But there was also an influx for sure in the IT space. So mobilizing all of the workforce to work from home. So immediately rolling out platforms like Teams and looking at security, looking at broadband bandwidth and provisioning laptops and upgrading those. So there was a lot of movement in those areas, and that was a lot of urgency and quite big pressure, I would say, especially on delivery teams to just make sure everything is secure, up and running, because the business continuity would be dependent on that. So for sure, for me, the focus changed at that time. So it was quite fast-paced, but in other areas, standstill, complete standstill, just waiting. And now I can see agendas have changed a little bit in what projects are being initiated. So those projects I see are more focused on how do we survive in the sort of, we could say post-COVID, but some people say you cannot really say post-COVID world, but in the new normal. So how do we actually survive and how do we stay competitive in the market? So choosing which projects will go ahead and how do we transform and what is our strategy going forward are the big questions. And I think companies are really looking at each other and internally and externally benchmarking, researching, and trying to figure out what is that strategy and which projects are we going to deliver. So that's kind of the biggest change for me that I observed in my profession. Yeah.
I think everyone's seen a bit of a shift in priorities across the whole business. So over the past few months, I think people in general, aside from being employees, just people have felt scared, confused, and emotional, and are of course bringing that to work. I mean, they're bringing home to work because they are home while they're working. So how have you managed that emotion in the business? And has that been reflected in your comms, or have you kind of kept the emotion out of your comms? And what successes have you kind of felt and found there? That again can be for anyone. Just jump in.
I think we definitely have been led by being authentic and empathetic. It was the shift from always just the employee experience to now being a little bit more of the human experience for us. I think what we often will do is, and then previous to this, is big corporate messaging, but actually that doesn't work anymore. Everybody is having an individual experience. So it's leveraging your different channels in the business. So we might broadcast something out from our CEO that would go to a global audience and put something through our intranet, but then we have line manager briefing packs, and there would be different messaging in there that would be dependent on the audience that they would be sharing communications and information with. And it really is about being human. And Paulina, you talked about Teams, and I think that was a really big opportunity for us. Our IT team rolled out Teams overnight. I think we went into lockdown on the 23rd, and what was supposed to be a program of change, which probably would resonate with you, Paulina, went into just, okay, we're launching it, and people adapted. And I think what it will teach us is a lot of these programs that we think need 6, 12, 18-month change programs behind, actually people can adapt. And we use that. So we would used to do really slick videos that we would bring a full corporate team into. And actually it was just recording the CEO on the 24th of March on Teams and getting that out instantly. So it was the speed and frequency of messaging. And not being, I mean, we had to do furlough, we had to do all the tough things that many businesses did. But just making sure that the messaging wasn't too corporate. You had to be human, and we will definitely be taking that into our comms now and into the future.
Yes, I just wanted to say, Prarthna, about the messaging. What I noticed definitely, and I will echo your experience, is that having leaders speak from a vulnerable place, so actually showing their human side and saying that, admitting that it is uncertain, or saying what they don't know, or even appearing on a selfie camera on Teams, like that, just showing that they are not in a shirt with a tie and looking very sleek, but actually being there as, you know, in their house with a t-shirt on, and actually being a human and speaking about how they feel as well and what they are worried about. So I think that I think it builds trust. And what I saw is as well kind of facilitating more conversations around what's happening, so opening up to more two-way engagement. So focusing less on broadcasting worked well for me when I was looking at across the projects we were deploying, and opening up more to listening, because communicating is also listening. But I think traditionally in change management we would always focus on listening more. So co-creation. So if I think about why people resist change, often it's the not invented here problem. So if they don't co-participate in creating the new reality, they feel like it's kind of imposed on them. So they start being, you know, sometimes they have valid concerns that should be addressed, like lack of information through comms, or lack of skills, like let's address it through training, or lack of clarity. Sometimes people have, you know, ideas about risks that leaders don't see. So they would raise those, which we can address through the comms as well and through engagement. But I think my point was that with that co-creation is not necessarily possible to an extent that we would like to see it traditionally in change and change communications. That has to be managed in a slightly different way. So less, I think, less perfection, less going into, you know, we need to have everything buttoned down and everything thought through and the right messages and analysis of the audience, but actually turning more into agile and delivering sprints and just setting that expectation. Let's talk about emotions. Let's talk about what we don't know, and keep the drumbeat of communications and engagement, and probably listen more. So these would be the things for me, I would say. If you want to think about emotions, definitely acknowledging them.
I would just add, I think Zoom has been a great leveling sort of across the organization. As Paulina said, you know, I'll never forget the first town hall we did with our CEO and editor. Our editor's 8-year-old son came in the background, got an ice cream out of the fridge and walked away. Could care less that his mom was on a town hall with 2,000 people. But the feedback that we got on Slack was like, that's what people needed in that moment. Like, this is a normal person. She's at the top of the senior management team, but she's dealing with the same things that we're dealing with. It's obviously not, you know, apples to apples, but at least it showed that like we're all in the same boat a little bit. And, you know, I think the messaging that our CEO always came out with was, we're going to get through this as one organization. Like, not just at one department, we're all on the same team right now. And I think that the feedback that we got from Slack, from our staff surveys was that message really, really resonated, that it wasn't like, we're going to get through this department by department, or, you know, team leader by team leader. It's like, we're an organization and we're going to get through this year together. And that, I think, more than anything, has really sort of helped people feel less anxious about what could happen in sort of the short term. You know, that's not to say, you know, in the long term, who knows what will happen, but just to get through this year, that was like really, really critical.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've very much had the same kind of one team try to get through it together message. I wanted to go back to something that Paulina said around co-creation, because I actually really passionately believe in that, but it's quite hard, extra hard at the moment to create that. Teams help. But one of the things I was reading is some research from McKinsey, I think, that said in times of crisis, there's a 30% increase in people's desire to be recognised and included. So I think it's that piece when you're going through a crisis or a change, is to feel part of something and to be included and recognised is really important. So even the things, I guess, the smaller things, you know, running stories about who people are, you know, the fun questions about their pets, their real life, you know, the story you had of the ice cream, the kids with the ice cream, all of that, you know, we had some real life stories of how, you know, how people were living in lockdown, loads of baking, loads of fitness and exercise, this kind of ordinary life, actually was what people wanted to hear, how other people were living their lives and where they were in the world. So some of that contribution can come from lots of different places. It doesn't necessarily have to be a business contribution. It's a personal human contribution as well. So for us, that helped us through it. You know, I was looking back at some of the stories on our internal communication, and they started with baking and walking and, you know, stuff with the kids, and that was the bit, as you said, that everyone was, you know, really keen to read about and felt good about reading too.
Absolutely. Some of our clients had some great success with stories about how they got creative with their working from home spaces. And there were some people, you know, standing desks at their counters in the kitchen, and just that, you know, we're all in this together, figuring it out day by day kind of approach. So I'm interested in feedback. The idea of feedback has come up a few times. I'm interested in how each of you facilitated that. I'm not sure, like, was the opportunity for feedback available before, or were these channels kind of set up? Megan, you had mentioned Slack. Were those channels kind of set up so that you could get feedback from your internal audience?
I mean, we do quarterly surveys, so that, and we ask the same questions so we can gauge over time how people are feeling. I will definitely say the latest survey, which we sent out last week, morale has definitely taken a dip. And I think, you know, we've definitely gone from the baking stage to how the hell are we going to get through this over the next 6 months? Like I see there's a question about like getting through the dark period of winter. Like that's, I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've heard winter is coming and just this sense of like doom, you know? And so I think it's now moving past that sort of, oh, this is fine, we can do this, to, oh, we have to keep doing this, and finding ways to really maintain productivity and morale. And I can give a few ideas of that later on. But so what we do is we do quarterly surveys. And obviously we encourage people to also give feedback to their team leaders and to their managers so that can get back to the top and we can really do something about it.
Yeah, I think from our side, so I had said we do line manager briefing packs, and that from the start has always been a channel for two-way communication, so we can cascade messages down. But when we launched them, and every time we send one out, we remind line managers that the way we structure our packs is this what you need to know, this is what you need to do, and then some questions for discussion. And those questions for discussion is meant to facilitate that two-way comms. So if they do get any feedback, and we've had instances before where people say, I still don't totally understand, feed that back up the value chain, and we can address that in any other comms that we're doing. We also issued out a pulse survey a couple weeks ago, and Megan, like you said, morale is down. But there was some positives that came out of it, that people felt that communications was handled really well. They liked the frequency of it. We did daily for about 6 weeks, and then we moved to weekly after that. And then there was still, excuse me, communication that was going out that wasn't pandemic related. And I think that is important. We were still winning projects. We were still completing projects. And it was about making sure that people remember who we are as the business, and not just focusing on, okay, we're in lockdown here, or restrictions are lifting here. And that was always part of the messaging. But some of the great initiatives we were also doing, or the work that just kind of felt normal, like we did a topping out ceremony, and normally we probably wouldn't give it very much airtime, but actually that feels a bit normal. So let's talk about it. And so I think that is really important. But Megan, like you said, the struggle is going to be, and the challenge for us internal comms people is to ensure that morale stays high, and people just see the nights are dark and the mornings are dark. And in March, it felt like I can go for my daily exercise, I did get to document it. And now people are like, I just want to watch TV and chill out. So it will definitely be a challenge moving into the darker months.
Yeah. So we've got a question come in. We'll move to the conversation around resilience and building morale. So the question is, I just came out of a meeting in which there was an overall pessimistic view about the upcoming winter months, calling them literally the dark period. So morale is low for the second, potentially stronger wave. How do you deal with employees feeling isolated and depressed, and any specific initiatives to create a more cheerful atmosphere? And we had kind of talked a little bit about this as well, just building morale. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
So we actually just launched, it was a 1 week Move for Charity thing that we did. So normally we host a big cycle ride that's very construction property focused. And this time actually from the 12th to the 16th of October, we hosted a virtual Move for Charity. And we were able to engage not just a London team, but all of our employees globally. Did it through Strava. It literally cost the business maybe $2,000, like built a Just Giving page, linked it up with the site, so our costs were so low. And we had people moving throughout the week, swimming, walking, running, cycling, sharing everything on Strava, fundraising if they could. If they couldn't, that was totally fine. It was about movement and taking part. And honestly, every morning I would wake up, go onto LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and we just had so many employees participating. Raised £100,000 for Mental Health UK and other local mental health charities, which was amazing. But the energy and the excitement, and people were sending in messages, sharing their photos. So I think if you could maybe find something that you can, the 8 factors of employee engagement, giving something back hits all of those on that 8 factors of engagement circle. And people want to do something, feel like they're having a purpose that isn't just walking down their stairs and starting to work. So can you find an initiative that might start engaging people, focus on their mental health, their well-being, getting outside, being active, a socially distanced walk with someone in the team if they can, or a friend? I think that for us, that has been a big positive. So I would just try and find something that maybe you think you can roll out to the masses, and again, isn't just focused on one group. It will start to galvanize a wider population.
I think celebrating every positive moment is really critical. So your topping out ceremony, we hit a great milestone celebrating that. There was a documentary that was made about part of our business just before this all happened and finally aired not long ago. So we had a virtual cinema night with popcorn and all of that kind of stuff that we sent to people. So that was good morale, all of those little milestones and achievements to really celebrate those. And I think the thing that is popular is those key parts of what really means something to the employee groups, whether it's sustainability, as you said, well-being, mental health, diversity, initiatives that kind of go back to those core subjects that people really care about, kind of gain energy and give a new purpose.
Yeah, I think I try to balance like things that I know our CEO cares about. So, obviously he wants people to stay connected to our business strategy. So one way we do that is every 2 weeks we have a lightning talk session. So we give people the reins to present for 5 minutes, a great project that they're working on that maybe someone else doesn't know about. And that kind of hits a lot of objectives, not only educating people about what's going on across the business because they can't literally drop by the water cooler anymore, but also giving people a chance to be recognized for their work. And I think recognition is something that I think a lot of I'm struggling with in terms of how do I enable people to be recognized if they're not physically in an office. So one thing we're thinking about is like a peer-to-peer recognition scheme that we can run on. We use Slack as sort of our collaborative, quick comms channel. And so, even setting up something like a kudos channel just to give people an opportunity to recognize their peers. And, that can be rolled out really quickly. It doesn't require any money, which I think is really important these days. So I'm thinking about what are the things I can roll out over the next couple of weeks just to get people through the winter. So I think that's one thing. I would also say making sure that you replace your Christmas parties with something, because, the end of your Christmas party, at least for us, it seems like a silly thing, but when it's missing, I think people feel it. And so we're trying to think about, can we give team leaders like a set budget so that they can do something for their teams? It could be like a virtual escape the room. It could be a cocktail class, something just to replace that end of year recognition that they get from their team leaders. It doesn't have to be, no one's probably going to do a big Christmas party this year, but finding replacements for things so that you at least make sure people feel recognized. So that's, and then the last thing I will say is the feedback that we're getting is that people are really tired of meetings. And, you know, a lot of I'm not in back-to-back meetings like some of my colleagues in the product and technology team are, but they're literally in back-to-back meetings where they don't even have breaks. Like they can't even go to the bathroom. So we're trying to roll out some best practice principles, like either like a no meeting day once a week where like you are not allowed to book meetings that day, or, you know, on Friday afternoons, no meetings, building in 10 minutes. So like we use Google Suite, so you can actually sort of force meetings to be 50 minutes instead of 60 minutes, just to build in like a 10-minute comfort break, and we can roll that out across the business. It sounds like a really small thing, but like even doing that has had a massive impact. People are telling, you know, that's something that they want. They just want to be given permission to like be able to have 10 minutes breaks between meetings. So I think it's about finding those like little things that, you know, the virtual events that aren't super time wasters. They're 30 minutes, you know, every 2 weeks, about lightning talks or diversity inclusion initiatives, something to give staff an opportunity to talk about what they're doing, and then pairing that with sort of peer-to-peer recognition and obviously continued recognition from the top.
Yeah, I think that's really important. Some of the strategies we've been working on with some of our clients as well is recreating, like, how do you recreate after work drinks digitally? But those after work drinks are really important in keeping that morale high, and that's how relationships get built. So we had the idea of doing like a cooking class where you bring in a chef who hosts the class, send out a list of ingredients before, and then everyone can cook dinner on work time, and then have dinner ready for their families at home. And it's just that little, like, how can you recreate that opportunity to create connection on like digital in a new and different way, especially as we enter into round 2 as we're seeing it's coming. So I want to talk a little bit about strategies for reacting quickly moving forward. So I'd like to understand if you had a strategy or a kind of a plan for if anything happened similar to COVID. Obviously we couldn't have planned specifically for COVID, but did you have a quick reaction strategy? And Paulina, I'd love to hear some of your perspective on what happens when you have to react to change really quickly, because I know in most change management programs you have a lot of time to plan for what that change might look like, but we obviously didn't have that. So I'd love to understand a bit about how you can react to change quickly when you don't have a lot of time.
Yes, so shall I start on the
Sure.
answer? Right, so like you said, traditionally in change management, I think the success of having change management methodology in place is actually leveraged by the fact that you can start really early. So starting with stakeholder analysis and really understanding who these stakeholders are and what is their interest, what is their stake in the actual change that's coming up, focusing on the why and looking at business readiness. So when we think about readiness for change, doing assessment that is not only looking at the communication side, but also the willingness to change. So have we created that understanding and the readiness to take action to do something to change? And also, are there any obstacles in the business that are in the way operationally or in, like, let's say, in the risk areas that we can address so that change happens? So it's sort of enabled from the organizational perspective, not just human psychology perspective. So having all that in mind, when planning for change, we engage with a group, we call it the Change Network. So it's a really great way to open up the two-way conversation and get some real feedback from real people, because we have the agents, or the champions we call them, that can that are normally selected or nominated, and they are part of the business, and our way to have someone in the local area or the office or the plant, the factory, whatever that makeup of the business is, that can actually from different level of seniority tell us in weekly meetings what is needed to be addressed. So we've got all that preparation normally coming up, and all these building blocks ready. So when we are actually doing the awareness, understanding, call to action and reinforcement comms, when we go into the project comms, that's almost like adding the last layer of everything that we've researched, all the conversations we had, all the knowledge we have, and everything that we incrementally addressed before we actually start communicating. So that's like the ideal scenario. But when we have situation like with COVID, right, we don't have that preparation of 9 months or 8 months of, you know, doing all this work. So that's one of the challenges, and it happens a lot in programs sometimes when change managers or change communications are engaged quite late. So when then we land and then everything, like the solution is already designed, so there is not really that much space for feedback or co-creation. So then what we need to do is we need to, first of all, be more agile in the way we approach communication. So think about how can we combine all the phases together. So instead of having all the preparation and the perfection of going from one stage to another, try to do it more in sprints and deliver a little bit, see if it works, test it, and then come back. So that really helps, because we kind of feel out what's happening in the stakeholder landscape, see whether we've got alignment or where that alignment is missing, and come back and just address the changes. So it's constant two-way, and we still deploy the change network, but everything just happens a lot faster. And the planning horizon, instead of it being very much waterfall, which is still, I would say, in change management, primarily the main methodology. I think from Agile, what really works with this kind of scenario where you cannot really plan that much ahead is shortening the horizon and just doing as much as you can, and then testing it, putting it out there for feedback. But really, I think the key is to set the expectations that what we are giving is minimum viable product. It's not the perfect, sleek, and ideal campaign, or we don't know everything. So we're just feeling it out, and then we are inviting that co-creation. So we're delivering and co-creating at the same time. So these phases kind of come together, but in a different style.
Okay. So we're seeing that it's quite important, that feedback, that co-creation is really important. That's come up a few times. And letting go of perfection, I guess, is what we found over the last year, is that we need to kind of let go of that delivery of perfection and deliver what we can right now, because we're all kind of reacting at the same time. So for the other panelists, I'd be interested to know about, you know, a reaction strategy, if you had one, and if you have one moving forward, maybe going into 2021. We don't know what's coming. So I would like to understand a bit more about what that looks like for each of you.
For me, I think it's about understanding who the audiences are and being able to reach them quickly. So those channels of communication and how you do that. And then people ask really smart questions. So I think it's taking the time to let people ask the questions, because in that way that helps to shape the answers, and being comfortable with, we don't know all the answers yet. So for me, it's around knowing who your audiences are and how to reach them, so that you can do it quickly, but also making time, because people do ask those questions that you might not have brainstormed already, and actually that helps shape the communication and where you take it. So we didn't have a plan for when we went into COVID, but we could reach our audiences and then work quickly from there, and just make time for enabling the line managers to answer and ask, and have time to ask the questions, and then come back with answers when we can.
Yeah, I would echo what Tabitha said. It is about listening. We didn't, like you said, have a pandemic strategy, and it was very reactive. We always have crisis comm strategies externally. Obviously, reputation management, that's all really important. But we know that brands are built from the inside out. We know that if your brand isn't upheld internally, it's not going to be upheld externally. So what it has done, and I think us internal comms people know that, but what the pandemic has taught, not IC people, but senior leadership, other people across the business, is how important it is to also have an internal comms reaction, crisis comms strategy. And if we're not supporting our people within the business when it is a global pandemic, that will not give you the best opportunity for talent attraction when we come out of this in the future, and retention. And it's further than just communicating what's happening in the here and now. It's having foresight into what impact will this have externally later down the line. And for us, it's about making sure that we stand by all of the way that we've done things. Like you said, Tabitha, it's about listening. It's audience mapping, finding out that actually we now have, you would do an audience mapping exercise externally. So that's something we should be doing internally as well. So you have work from home people, you have people that are still going to the office. We have site employees, global audiences. How do they engage? How best do we, let's look at the data and see actually when did they engage? What was the best time to communicate with them? These are all measures you would take when you were building a website, or if you were looking at a marketing plan and a marketing campaign externally. So let's bring that insight internally, and let's make sure that's really embedded in our ways of working.
Yeah, I would just add, I think for us, 2021 is about how do we become like the hybrid organization where we have people perhaps permanently or most of the time working outside of an office, people who want to come back to the office, and how do we make sure that people who are working remotely don't feel isolated and don't feel like they're losing out from people who are back in the office. So that's been our big sort of priority, and I've been working really closely with the HR team, but also our senior leadership team to come up with some principles that apply to everyone. So not just one department, but everyone, no matter where you are. I mean, we're a global organization as well, and obviously different regions are going through different things. People in Hong Kong are back in the office. People in the US probably won't be back in the office for a long time, but we still felt like it was really important to say, these are the global principles that we will abide by as a company, these are the commitments that we will support. So we will, support remote working and flexible working to a greater extent than ever before. And that's like a global principle that our board has signed off on. And then I think from there, it's, okay, what infrastructure are we missing? Like, what people infrastructure is missing? For us, it was like, we don't have a great internet. So we've done a lot of work in the past few months about actually getting an internet that works for people, that, can be personalized based on their region. Because before we just had a Google site. What does onboarding look like? We need a completely virtual onboarding program, and so that's something that we're prioritizing now. And also, how can you give people a chance to get involved in what the future of the company looks like? So we've been thinking about, should we do an employee handbook that could almost be like a Wikipedia entry that people can submit ideas to and contributions to, and we can moderate that. But it's sort of a culture pack that everyone has a say in, and it's not just, here's what we're going to do. It's you tell us, how we should be as a company. So those are like sort of the long-term things. I say long-term, but really like next 6 to 12 months, what does our company look like? How do we get people involved, and what kind of infrastructure is missing that we really need to get in place like immediately?
Yeah. That's a great point. So speaking about the future, we're just going to have one more question here, and then we've got a couple questions from the audience coming in as well. So we'll move to the Q&A after this one. But I'd love to understand from each of you, what best practices have you learned throughout the last 6 months, 8 months that you will bring into 2021 and into the future that you probably wouldn't have necessarily used beforehand? Like, what has the pandemic taught you that is going to stick?
I think from us, it's driving our content from a what's in it for me content strategy. What we often did before was just, and this goes back to the audience mapping I was saying, is send out kind of corporate wide mass communications. But actually what we saw from the stats and the data during the pandemic was engagement really, really increased when there was content that resonated with people. And I think we all know this, but we don't give ourselves the time to really sit down and map out one piece of content and how it can support different audiences, or which content should that the different audiences might be engaging with. And so the big focus for us will be around driving a what's in it for me content strategy, looking at those different audiences and catering content to those audiences through channels that they want to consume content through. again, you do a lot of this work externally, but people are consuming it. It's that mixternal. People are consuming news internally and externally the same ways. And we need to make sure that our comms, it works for people. And then the other thing would just being really authentic human communications, using things like Teams, making sure that if you need to get a message out, the leadership are able to record something on their own, and not sometimes that reliance always on making sure that you have a comms person there. I think the leadership has learned over the past few months, actually, I can just record something and send it out. So it would just be authentic communications, quick, fast communications, but really driven through the human experience and through analytics and understanding.
Yep.
What both of what you've just said is what I'm looking at too, but I think it's about reshaping as we come out of our chapter 11. We're a kind of new OneWeb. What does that look like? What are the things that we have an amazing chance to redo and do again with the benefit of hindsight? So there's that, keeping that piece of listening in, and then helping people to co-create the next era of OneWeb. And I think we were always moving very fast towards milestones. It was kind of a bit of a space race. But for us more internally now, it's about running our own race and thinking about what are the things that really matter to the people, our employees, and how do we make sure those are at the heart of the business strategy. I said about sustainability and well-being, mental health, diversity, that there are lots of things that really matter to our employees that we need to build into the strategy, rather than have the strategy and these bits somehow tagged on. So that's what I've learned is what really matters, what are the connections that really matter that we take forward.
Sorry, Paulina or Megan, any thoughts before we head into Q&A?
Yes, so for me, I think I would repeat what I said already, and I was emphasizing, which is don't aim for perfection, shorter planning horizons, more minimum viable product and testing and coming back and incrementally improving, rather than long-term waterfall approach with, especially with communications. And I think what I would add to that is keeping the drumbeat of comms, keeping it at the heart of the change, because I think what I see now is with this uncertainty, it's better to communicate even more, maybe like more visuals and less text if we don't know exactly what are the nuggets of wisdom that we actually want to share, the strategy, but put it out there and keep that cadence of comms going, so we keep our touch base and we are available. And I think that's important for people to have something to hold on to, that the comms is going out, and we keep the schedule and we always say something. And even if it's, of course, not over communicate, I mean, have the purpose and intention of why are we communicating, but I think it's important not to just shift it to the side. For me, that's definitely a learning. It's more important than ever. And yeah, the vulnerability and the admitting that, you know, we're all humans, and opening up the two-way communication, ideally leveraging the change network if possible, more than ever probably. So if I was to give a tip for organizations, if they want to grow in their agility and capability for change, for embracing change as a business, I would say one of the really good things to do is to have the network of change agents and have them always there, and engage with them and grow. And you can do so many things with it. I mean, it's a whole separate topic, but I would definitely recommend looking into setting up a permanent network of change agents that can be re-engaged for different campaigns and purposes, and building that capability in the employees' behavior, so that change is kind of normal expectation and we can adapt to it, whatever comes at pace. yeah, so that's for me.
That's interesting too, because even having your, I don't necessarily want to call it this, but like pandemic people, who are like understanding of how quickly the business is, and they can be your partners in encouraging their teammates and really working with you as you're kind of reacting to all of the changes. That's a great point.
And encouraging peer coaching for that purpose, having that meaningful conversation with a peer coach or a buddy, you can call them a buddy. So for programs like large scale programs, we would have a buddy that is assigned to a group of people or a person that helps them through the change curve. So when they actually struggle, even on the emotional level, there is that one person you can actually have that bi-weekly meeting with for half an hour and talk to, and they would ask you a question. Okay, so you are like down here from 1 to 10, you are a 3. What would it take to get you to a 4? And we could like even just like on a very sort of conversational level start that change capability within starting from people, then going to teams, from teams to departments, from departments to functions, to then the whole organization.
I was just going to add, in terms of best practice, just 2 things. I would say empathy and honesty in leadership communications. I think that should definitely continue. And also, I think virtual events, people feel more connected to a CEO who's in front of them than someone who's walking on a stage, especially if you're not physically in the same office. That seems like a small thing, but actually it's the feedback that we've gotten is that has really helped people feel more connected, especially people who are outside of our headquarters.
Perfect. All right, so we've got 2 questions that have come in. So the first one is, what channels are you using to communicate internally? Teams, email, intranet, anything else? Can be a quick fire off answer if there's any other ways you're communicating.
All of the above that you just said. Like I said earlier, manager briefing packs. We also have a mobile app, and we use push notifications if we need to direct people really quickly. And then there is the more traditional channels, and I don't think those are dead either. So especially when you have a workforce that's on site, they might not have time to open up their laptops and engage with the more digital forms of communication. So is there anything that you can put around site in terms of posters or signposting? I think we often just move into the digital space, so it's trying to remember that there are other channels, and then just really using your line managers. They're such a critical group of people that can share information up and down, and so they are vital to be engaged.
Perfect.
I was going to say, don't forget LinkedIn, social media as well. Those, I think it builds advocacy actually. If our internal, obviously that's what we want to achieve from internal comms, is that engaged advocates of employees, but also those that are external and respected and advocating for your company or an initiative really builds morale as well. So that kind of external recognition is important, as well as all the different internal channels.
Yeah, I think you have to meet people where they are. And I mean, we don't, people aren't, journalists like to read email, product and tech people like to use Slack. It is what it is. I'm not going to get everyone on one channel, for years to come. So we just make sure that, it's coming from the right person. If it comes from the CEO or someone on the leadership team, they'll read it. And that's kind of like our sort of philosophy, is like, if it needs to be read, we have to make sure it comes from the right person.
That's a great point. All right, we have one last quick question and then we'll wrap up. So is it best to wait for better times before embarking on a significant change program? Paulina, I think that one might be directed at you.
Sure. I think it's a very good question, and it's hard to answer it as a yes or no, because there are the dependencies. I think for business, if it depends, what do they think is the priority at the moment? Because if the big change program like transformation is aimed to keep the business afloat or competitive, why should we wait? This is the best time now to get that chance to get in quickly and start changing, let's say, the target operating model. Let's look at retail. I mean, in retail, this is now the time for them to change and embark on those big transformation programs, because if they want to stay competitive in the current market, they have to go online. And I mean, it depends what that change program is aiming to deliver and what is the ultimate strategy. But I think seizing the opportunity of the world around us changing is probably paradoxically the best time to start shifting towards a different future. Yeah.
All right. Well, Paulina, Megan, Prarthna, and Tabitha, thank you so much for joining us this morning. I know that this is one of my favorite panels that we've hosted so far. It helps that I'm moderating as well, but I just wanted to say thank you so much for spending your morning with us, and thank you to the attendees as well. Just wanted to call out that our last event of the year is at the last Wednesday of November, and it's about spending or saving, approaching marketing during a recession. So if you are interested, or if that's a relevant topic, we'll send out a link to grab tickets for that one as well. I hope you have a wonderful Wednesday, and we will talk to you all soon.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you.
Yeah.